That's an old resolution, we'll forgive you. What is it now?
Cultural.
Cultural, thank you.
Cultural here?
Culture.
Yes,
Kick me
so
off the committee.
I want you to act with some,
You got the wrong
Culture.
number.
Culture.
yes,
You gotta have some
exactly.
culture.
Drinking culture.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
I think most of us, well, let's do brief introductions, at least up front. Paul Goldstein here,
Andrew Zelter.
Diana Sweetine.
and
Paul
committee
Holmes.
is around the
David
table.
Sheldon.
Okay, if you want to all introduce, go for it.
Who are we introducing ourselves to?
Each other.
Not
Each other.
normally, I wasn't planning on that, but if you want to.
That's okay.
Okay, so let's keep going.
Pass that to the back.
Okay, so what did I do with the agenda? Here it is, thank you.
Did you sign?
Okay, so we're starting today's meeting with an update on a few items regarding Hudson River Park. And for that, we're going to call on Kevin Quinn, Senior Vice President, Design and Construction.
Okay, that's me.
Thank you. Welcome.
I'm Kevin Quinn from the historic Hudson River Park Trust, and I'm joined with Tom Adams in the back there as the project manager for Pier 26, and Chris Fazio is also from the trust here. So I just wanted to give you an update on the status of Pier 26. We made a lot of progress. I was here about a year ago at the full community board and gave an update. And just as a refresher, I just want to walk through the design because probably a lot of you haven't seen it in quite a bit of time. But this is the concept. City Vineyard is here on the upland side, and this is the part that is just about to be in construction now. So there's the lawn area, a forest area, a place for ball play, basically soccer fields, a lounge area, a lounge deck area, the dune scrub area, and this is where a lot of kids can gather for educational programming as well. There's a lot of steps and places to gather around here. And there's a walkway that projects over an ecological get-down area, and that's, I'll show a little more details about that later on, but basically this, you can walk over this square area, and the square area is planted with marshy vegetation that's designed to flood and let the water go. It's tidal plantings. So this is what that looks like when it's really designed. Pretty amazing design, I think. It was done before my time, so I'm not taking credit for it, but it's really pretty interesting. A lot packed into a into a small area. This is the walkway, a straight shot promenade here. This is the grassy area. This is a little wooden boardwalk that raises up to some seating area, a little terrace seating area that you can look down on the soccer field. This is not a asphalt soccer field, but it's got a resilient plastic tile surface so that it's easier on the knees and that it doesn't scrape knees and whatnot. And there's a fence around it. This is the lounging area / educational gathering area. There's two little huts here to get away from the sun while these trees get a little larger, and they have swings in them. You can see that.
Is that a seating area by the fields?
Right here?
No, on the other side.
Right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is still a little in flux. It's meant for movable seating. So it's going to be like picnic table type, lounge chairs.
Right, because I assume there'll be parents coming to watch their kids play
Exactly.
and so forth.
Exactly.
Movable tables and chairs with umbrellas.
Great.
Grouping families can get together and have like a picnic while the kids are playing on the field.
Sure, that's good.
And then some dune scrub grass area here with the little pavilions with swings in them. And then this really amazing walkway that projects out over the water. And this is the tiered planting area that floods at different levels. And I have a section of that a little down the line. There's also kind of a placeholder estuarium here. And the playground that is designed but cannot be constructed right now because this is the staging area for all of this construction work. And then eventually when the estuarium gets underway, this would also be the construction area for that. So we have kind of a space shell game we're trying to play here, but basically the playground's fully designed and ready to be implemented when feasible.
Is that what you labeled science play on the prior screen?
Yes. Yes, exactly. And it's really cool. If you've been to Chelsea Waterside Playground, which is the playground that's done up near Chelsea Piers, it's kind of on the same theme. It's a big wooden fit. The kids can climb in and climb around. It's really pretty exciting. My daughter's 7 years old. She loves it. and she'll love this too when we can get it going.
Excuse me, the learning, teaching area, about how many people can be in there at the same time?
A lot of people can fit in there. It's really, the seating areas are at least 25, 30 kids at a clip, and you can really put them in closer. And there's a number of places where they can gather. This is kind of tiered seating, and there will be lounge chairs there for adults when teaching is not happening, but then all these steps kids can gather on, and we imagine the teacher would be below. So you could really have 25, 50 kids pretty easily there. It's just,
25 to 50.
yeah, it's just how much you can project and how well you can control them. But it's a pretty large area. And there's another great gathering spot here, which is where we imagine teachers can explain how the tidal plants work here and the floodplain plants work. And there's a little walkway which will not be open to the public generally, but under guides like a ranger or a similar type of teaching professional can.
Who's gonna schedule that space?
That's a good.
We have a lot of schools. I'm just curious who manages the area.
Well, right now it will be managed by our education department, but how that grows and how that develops, I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, thank you.
My job is to build it. This is another view of the same. And this is the lawn area that's almost uplands. And this is that wooden walkway that starts taking off. This is the soccer field. It's kind of a weird view of it, but it will be enclosed with a fabric mesh to keep the balls in, and it's pretty transparent. Pretty cool. And the terraced seating area here, so you can either watch kids play or watch your own kid play. And some informal gathering spaces here with some movable furniture.
What did you say the surface was?
It's a plastic resilient tile on top of concrete. And if you've seen, Red Bull has a program with city parks where they do like informal little soccer pitches. It's exactly the same material. And I spoke to some schools to make sure that it's popular and the kids don't get hurt, and they like it quite a bit.
How large a surface area is that? That's enough for two?
It's 2 junior soccer fields. Tom, do you know the
I
exact?
don't know the exact U7, U8 size, but we can get that for you. Just I was
Off the top of your head, do you have a sense how it compares to the green space on Pier 25? Is it comparable? Is it larger?
It's smaller.
Smaller?
This is the little pavilion areas to gather. And this is where I was talking about where you could have 25, 50 kids pretty easily scattered along here with the teacher at the bottom. Here's another view of that. It's pretty impressive how much programming has been fit in here, but yet it still has lots of kind of nooks and crannies to get away from the crowd. The only thing that's changed in this rendering since we've progressed the design is that these swings are going to be a little bit different. They're not going to be individual swings. They're going to be more like what you would see on a wraparound porch type of swing where 2 people can sit on a swinging bench. We didn't like the idea of kids kind of colliding into each other on the swing, so we have just one. This is this pretty, I think, amazing flyover, and just an amazing view. And this is the walk down. There will be a gate there so that the public can't just go down whenever and be guided tours, but it will be built. And this is the zone down below. That's what you're seeing here. And it's built in trays, and different types of plantings will be placed in each elevation. And it's really kind of an interpretation of how the river coastline used to be. So it's similar plants, or the same plants as used to occur on the Hudson River waterfront, but built in compartments. And that's really, we're not trying to recreate a natural thing. We're basically using it as a teaching tool and also something beautiful. So we can explain how it works to the kids, and it's also just great to look at. This is it in section, and these are the various, this is the 100-year floodplain at the top, and this is the mean high water, and this is the lowest, this is mean low water, and this is the lowest of the low tides. And you can see how it'll flush in and out of this concrete compartment with the various plantings. And just like the river used to be, you have kind of a hard scrabble edge, and then it gets more and more lush till you get to more substantial plantings. And that's exactly what you will see in there.
So that water will, that area will flood as the
Yeah.
tides and...
Flood and then it will drain out, just like a real river. Except the main difference is it's built in a box above the water.
And so you're starting construction now?
It's under construction, and I'll get to the slide of where we are, because I'm really happy to say that it's in construction, it's on schedule, we have great contractors. I'm not used to doing this type of presentation. It's all going very well, actually.
What, can I ask you-
I'll tell you what my grandmother
Well, we'll
used to
see
say.
if we can make it harder for you as we go along. I have a question about, what about, how will it be maintained in terms of the flotsam and jetsam that flows up and down
We're
the
going to
river?
maintain it. It's going to be a lot of work. We know that. We're prepared to do it. It's much like in the little nooks and crannies around Gansevoort.
Right.
We have a lot of these places where it's just constant maintenance. We use a lot of volunteers to take care of that. But
All right, why don't we let him, usually we try to let them get through their presentation, but we'll have time for questions.
So just in case you're interested, these are the contractors that we have under contract, and the whole thing has been bid out and awarded to contractors, so it's all underway. Gilbane Construction, or Gilbane Incorporated, is the construction management firm that are our eyes in the field, making sure that everything is built to spec and that we're paying people appropriately and managing the day-to-day, keeping an eye on the safety, all of that. They're there full-time. The marine work, which is about 60% done, is Trevcon Construction. They're the ones that drove the piles at the end of the pier to support that eco get-down. The pile work is done, and I'll get to it in a minute, but we're about to install the concrete panels for that eco get-down. That's going to happen actually starting tonight, which I will talk about in a little bit. And then the landscape construction is Stephen Dubner Landscaping, and I encourage you to look them up on the internet. They've done quite a lot of work. There's really 2 or 3 great landscape firms in the city, and this is one of them. I'm really happy that they won this job. They've done a tremendous amount of work in the city successfully. And then the electrical work is EJ Electrical. It was founded in 1919. They're another reliable electrical company, well known. So we really basically scored with who won the bids, and I think that's because it's such a special project. It's really a portfolio project for these companies. So it's well underway. As I said, the marine work is more than half done. These are the oyster cages that we have already installed on the piles at the western end. So the new piles that were driven to support that eco get down, is what we're calling it, has these habitats for the oysters to grow and propagate on it. So these have already been installed. We have 6 of them on the 6 most western piles. So every once in a while we'll send a diver down there to check it out, see how it's going. But these have been successful. Brooklyn Bridge Park does something similar. And we know that even without these, our piles tend to get huge oysters growing because the water quality is getting better. We caught an enormous oyster on the bottom of Pier 40 recently. Maybe you read about that in the paper. It was gigantic. So anyway, these are installed already. And the concrete panels that will be the base of that eco get down, this is, I think it was last week, and it's in New Jersey. They're prefabricated there, and they're coming on barge over to us to be installed. So the eco get down also has, on top of that concrete panel system, are boulders that have already been purchased, fabricated. They're waiting to be installed. This is about 30 miles east of Lake George, upstate, and they're all just waiting for us to have that concrete in place, and then they'll be shipped down and installed. And in the nooks and crannies between all these stones will be the planting. It's a place called Champlain Stone. And this is the crane that just arrived this morning that will install those concrete panels for the eco get down. And there will be basically 3 nights of work. This is going to be there for about 4 days. And they have to do it at night when the tides, there's no wakes, well, minimal wakes on the river. The tide is high at about 9 o'clock tonight. And so this crane is really quite amazing. It can lift about 2 million pounds in a pick, in one single pick, which is pretty impressive and needed because each one of those concrete panels is about 250 tons. So 250 times 2,000, it's a lot of weight. So that's going to be there. It's quiet work. It's not going to make a lot of noise. There will be some lights so that they can safely see what they're doing, but it's pretty quiet work. And it's going to happen between 9 p.m. and 9 a.m. tonight, and then again Wednesday, and again Thursday, and then Friday morning it will get out of town. So this is the schedule. Near term, this is just what I talked about, that big crane being there, which is worth looking at if you happen to be over there. It's a pretty impressive crane. And then the long-term schedule, spring, the marine work completes. That's the TrevCon work, which is basically all that eco get-down stuff. So it's the piles which are done, the concrete platform for the eco get-down, and the boulders on top of it. That's pretty much their work. And then Stephen Dubner comes in and does the landscape work, which includes putting the plants in that eco get-down, but also all of the topside work, all of the paving, the plants, the swings, all of that woodwork. They're going to do all of that. And then fall 2020 is the scheduled completion date, but right now it's looking pretty good. I think we're going to beat that by a few months, actually.
So the summer will be use, there'll be summer use?
I'm not going to commit to that because
We have you on tape, you know.
Fall 2020 is the schedule, but
Right.
it does look pretty good. They're already building stuff off-site, getting ready to install it. So that's the update.
Okay, thank you. That was a lot of good news. Okay, I'm sure there's still a few questions.
So I would really be curious to know what the resiliency measures are, if any, on Pier 26. You know, we've spoken to Noreen Doyle on the Hudson River Park Trust's resiliency measures, which we were told were not. But on this pier, is there anything being done? So what happens in the next storm is the idea that, how much was this pier, for example? How much does this cost?
How much was this cost? So
Approximately, just.
30
it's
million.
about 30 million.
So if in the next Sandy, what's the projected idea that you won't get bothered? Or, in other words, we spend a great deal of time on this community board worrying about resiliency measures. And the mayor has just rolled out this land use plan, which is building a platform. We see the platform in the east side, and we see what goes on in Battery Park City Authority, and hours of time on this. Yet for the 4 miles of stretch along the Hudson River, in one of the most vulnerable areas of Lower Manhattan, we have nothing. So we're kind of curious, some of us, I think, very curious as to what, in anything, even in the specificity of this pier, is being acknowledged in terms of resiliency. For example, these concrete panels you're describing. Are they designed in some way that they're not floating away at the next storm? What's being done, if anything? Or is the attitude of the Hudson River Park Trust, take the $30 million, if there's another storm, that so be it, it floats away and we'll rebuild?
Definitely not, because getting that $30 million was quite a lot of work, and
I
I
know.
think we all know we're not getting that again. So that's not the attitude. Resiliency can mean a lot of things to different people, depending on the context. But for Pier 26, what we've taken resiliency to mean is that it's built to flood. So if another Sandy comes, it will flood. Nothing's going to float away. It's all lashed down, tied down. A lot of places in the park, historically, we've used big foam blocks to create grades, essentially, because it's a lot cheaper to do that than it is to use like soil fill. So in this case, we're using a different type of system. It's not big foam blocks. It's called a PET.
PET media at the far west end at the pier. That's to support the planting media.
Right.
And where we do have to use foam just for purposes of weight farther east on the pier, we're using really extensive foam strapping, and have learned lessons from some of the other piers that rose up so that we don't have that.
And it's mechanically attached.
So it'll stand up to Sandy,
Definitely Sandy.
or Sandy's sister.
The foam did not rise when Sandy went over Pier 25. The foam did not move and was not touched. In fact, the sand in the volleyball courts just went up and back down. So I think the wave action. Sandy didn't have a lot of wave action, but
It didn't have the velocity here that it had in like Staten Island.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of the 100-year flood that we, all of these different organizations and agencies, the city are designing for, what is the Trust's perspective on that vis-a-vis the construction of these piers?
Well, we are building them to flood, basically, because to build them above the 100-year floodplain, you're building very far up in the air. It's really not feasible, especially with the piers. They're already existent. So, we're dealing with the concrete elevations that we have, and we need to meet the grades that we already have, which meets the highway that we already have. And So to build above that floodplain, it's probably impossible in many locations. So what we've been doing, and what all the projects that I have underway, which is Pier 97, Pier 26, thinking about Gansevoort Peninsula, it's to build it under the assumption that it is going to flood, and that's just a fact of life, and make sure that it doesn't float away and the damage that is incurred is as minimal as possible.
But is the idea that it would actually not exist someday? Because according to when you talk to the Battery Park City Authority, this whole desire to build up Wagner Park an additional 8 feet, right, to hit this 15-foot line, which we're all hearing about, somehow that's not happening a few miles north, that we would just not see the piers anymore.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not asking it to be, critical. It's a beautiful pier. I look forward to using it, but I'm just thinking, boy, someday it won't be there anymore. Is that the idea?
Well, I can't predict the future.
No,
I
but-
don't know, but
Well, when you say built to flood, is the assumption that it can withstand most floods, and then you just have to clean it up and
right.
Yeah, so the sports field surfacing, the sports court tile is anchored down, it's not gonna float away in a flood, but it's not like synthetic turf, which would need to be replaced in the event of a flood. It's much more resilient than that. The furnishings are anchored to the pier, so they're not going to be floating away. The utilities are designed so that.
It's only the plants.
I just mean when
And
water
the plants are
rises.
designed, I mean, they're native plants, that the area at the west end of the pier is, it's designed to flood. I mean, the
Right.
PET media is designed to really function as a marshland.
And the forest and the,
And the
grass.
boulders are being designed so that if there is wave action, that it really functions as a wave break. Because even just daily, boat traffic is gonna have impacts on that get down, so
Oh, yeah.
that's been considered.
Okay, Wendy?
So I think what Alice is trying to say is that we're learning that by 2050, sea level will be 2.5 feet taller than now. You guys know that too. So I think that, it's fine, these piers are built, you're building this is planned. I know years ago I was part of that, meeting at Bob's community center with what do we want there. So bravo, it's great that it's coming along and we're all going to be excited that it's here. But I think what Alice is getting to and what our community board is trying to say is that there is no plan, north of Chamber Street all the way up. And as we know, the water came in right at that corner where Stye was.
Right.
So we've heard a lot of suggestions that, maybe the piers flood, but and this is not today's discussion, but we'd love to have you guys back to talk about what does it mean for example, if you're going to build a new building right there, how are you going to put a new building right on the water's edge when we know that Battery Park City is raising their water's edge by 8 feet? So I think that this is another day's discussion, but and we know you don't have the money, but we want to advocate right now for what the East River Park is getting and what was announced on the east side of, the Seaport and Fidei, and Battery Park is being, built up. And we and a few others in here live in Tribeca, and you're the solution. And there is no plan, no money. So we want to advocate another time, but please come back. But I think we want to say as loud as possible that this is great, we're so excited for this pier, but we'd like to have some sort of backstop someplace, so.
Which is thinking of resiliency in terms of protecting the neighborhood, not just the park itself.
Exactly,
Right.
so there are
The
bigger
question
issues.
is,
Yeah.
we have projects that are moving forward. This is one.
That's right, and we're excited about
Like we have the
this.
East River Esplanade is another one that we know are in that category,
That's
that
right.
they are
They're raising-
vulnerable
Yeah,
at
they're
this
raising
point.
the edge
So
by
the
8
question
feet.
is, do we want to try to build these things and at least take advantage of them and hope for the best, or we don't know how long that thing on the east side. That could take quite a number of years before that's going to ever happen.
could be
and
the
if it
100-year
does.
plan.
Yeah, so,
Well,
I don't want to get
I
into a
was saying-
lengthy discussion on
Exactly,
resiliency.
this is good for today, and thank you so much
Sure.
for the update, it is beautiful.
Thank you.
But we would love to have the park back another time to have the longer term discussion, because we think we all need to start advocating.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm coming from city, I used to be the chief engineer for city parks for a long time too. It's got to be a systemic, citywide solution. I mean, the trust, of course, we love our neighborhood and we want to build a great park, but you can't build a bathtub one section at a time. You really got to think holistically.
But
about
Battery
the
Park
city.
is.
Yeah, sure.
So, okay,
Okay,
thank you
okay.
very much.
Thanks very much.
Okay, David, you're next.
Yes, does appear to have beautiful landscaping, as much of Hudson River Park does, but not from the water. May I ask what facilities will be on this beautiful pier for working vessels, ships of any kind? Are some of those railings removable? Are there mooring points? Is there fendering?
Sure.
Is there any infrastructure for water or electricity? Whether or not it's chosen to be used or who uses it, it needs to be built in now. So let me ask, I didn't see anything in the illustrations other than, a beautiful pier, but what is there beyond the water's edge, beyond the bulkhead?
Tom, do you wanna-
There are facilities, bollards and electrical, sewage, and water for up to 2 historic ship-sized vehicles on the south side of the pier.
For room for 2 on the south side?
Yeah.
Is there
That's being
any,
built in as part of the
Which
project.
includes a sewage ejector too.
is there any possibility of a floating dock being installed?
DEC has provided funding for a floating dock, for a design of a floating dock. We don't have the funding to construct it yet, so as part of this design, Olin, who's the landscape architect, is preparing construction documents for placement of that floating dock. So they're
Right.
looking at locations right now. It would also be on the south side, probably closer to the upland area, but exactly where it's going to go is still being determined.
Okay. What's going on the north side?
Did you show 2 boats on the north side?
That was the conceptual plan, which and that conversation predates me about why the decision was to put them on the
Because
south.
there
side
are
of the
2,
north.
there are 4.
But the north side is going to be an elevated,
Yeah, 1, 2, 3.
that's going to be an elevated walkway. So there's no, that's the concept design. So there are.
Those
two are
not
no-
there.
there's
Also
no-
on the
it's
north
south
side.
The grades are high on the
So
pier.
that-
So that's a previous concept, so that's no longer
I guess you
accurate.
can, so,
The ships are on the south side.
because they need room for the gangway and all of that.
Right.
Go
All
ahead.
right, so there will be that possibility on the south side. Thank you.
Just to comment that on the north side there, that we did comment on that dock that was right next to ours. That would close down the kayaking program if that dock was put there. And we just obstructed too much, which I think we
That's
shared
on the
with
north side.
Maureen,
Right.
so I think that's good.
So that's gone. That's
Yes.
not there.
A couple of issues. One is, right now, Pier 26 is a bit of a drought zone. There's no water fountains for the public on Pier 26. And there's a problem already with the kayaking, that people get very dry. Is there gonna be any water fountains
Yes.
on
Yeah,
there?
there's a bottle filler.
And we're in the process
The
of.
new ones.
The new one, ADA, accessible bottle filler.
Will you be getting four-season water fountains like Prospect Park has?
We can't do that on the pier.
No,
because
you can't,
they
they're on the
freeze.
upland area.
Yeah. Not part of this project, but I could certainly think about that, because there is opportunity around here.
There's a
Regarding
restaurant.
sea level rise and that, we had an incident last summer where the water went over the bulkhead just north of Pier 26 and did quite a bit of damage to actually the dock, which hasn't been repaired yet. So I know you're telling me you're gonna fix things fast, and it was just a nor'wester, and it was not high, it was on a full moon and a nor'wester, and it just blew water and backed up onto the Hudson here and went into the grass area just north of Pier 26. So
Good.
that was not
Not bad for an old
enough
guy.
for the water on it. Another foot would have put that water on the West Side Highway.
I was just
And then
73.
lastly, it's a highway zone. I know you think these plants are gonna hang out there and they're gonna survive, but that, New York Waterway just pours down right past that thing, and we are gonna wait and see how those plants handle that wake
Right.
situation.
Yeah, we had Biohabitats was the sub-consultant with the design for the ecological get down. They work closely with Olin, so they really analyze this pretty closely. So we're going to be watching it closely as well, but there was a lot of analysis that went into that. And certainly the wave break with the boulders, they're promising it's going to achieve that effect, but we'll be monitoring
The
as well.
imported boulders.
Sorry? The imported boulders from Champlain.
Well, they could have come by the right last year. The thing is, you get spring tides, and the spring tides, the water's going to run over the boulders. We'll wait and see what happens.
And we know that. And the boulders are actually scalloped a little bit to create little bird baths too, so they're hoping to attract birds and all kinds of.
You would in the netting, you'll get the birds.
You will attract something.
The netting will catch the birds as they.
Okay, Mark is next.
Well, it shouldn't come to me. You know how much I like animals. so be careful with the birds. They'll come after you. I know you said the night work, the crane work would be quiet. That's kind of all relative. Was there any notification to the residents nearby or notices put up? Guess what? If you see this big giant crane and you hear noises of what's going on, blah blah blah, whatever.
It's really gonna be quiet.
We sent an email on Friday to the Community Board 1 offices. We notified I'm trying to blank on the name of the complex across the street, Independence Plaza.
Independence Plaza.
We sent it to their
Manager.
director of, I forget the woman's name off the top of my head. And we also
Debbie
sent
Dolan.
Sorry?
Debbie
The answer
Dolan.
is yes.
No,
All right.
not Debbie Dolan, it was somebody else, the name will come.
Diane Lapson.
Yes,
Ah.
yes.
Um,
And to the Battery Park City Authority.
All right, yeah, and there's not, and I don't think there's any residents further on the west side highway there. It's right. There isn't. Yeah, yeah.
I
There
don't want to
isn't.
disturb them, it was really
Yeah.
more like, what is that giant crane?
Yeah, well, that alone could, other than the noise, could be, you might avoid 311 or 911 calls, just as long as, maybe you gonna have any future night work like this?
We will be, there is going to be remainder of the prefabricated platforms will be installed by a smaller crane, and that will be happening a few weeks from now.
All right, so can we maybe do a little better notification? Maybe, I know we asked some of the construction, quality of life committee, if they can actually just post a notice on a lamppost across the street in the immediate neighborhood with a phone number if there are any issues, or, if we're just describing what's happening, so,
Sure.
that would be
If you
great.
want to give us any
Thank you.
context, we should add to our routing.
Okay. Okay. The side sheets.
Yeah, the broadsheet.
Yeah.
After he goes.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Call Matt.
Could you give us an update on the status of the estuary?
We have $10 million available, and we have a number of grants still outstanding that we're trying to get additional funding. All the applications have been made, and we're waiting to hear back from these various philanthropies. So,
What's
we're
your goal?
We're giving it a little time. Our goal is really.
You have 10 million, how much do you need?
It was 50, was
Was it
the
40 or
original
something?
number.
50?
Yeah, that was the original
That's still
number.
what we're looking at.
But we were told that the school, is the school going to, we were told that we would get an update, and that once the school, the Clarkson School had, university had, was no longer a player, that then the trust would come in and tell us what the alternatives
That's
were.
still being planned. We spoke to Madeline. She asked for just a little more time, another month or two before her fundraising is finished, and she would come in and do a larger presentation on the estuarium.
So there
Month or
is
two
something
after
planned for that
March?
spot that's
Yeah,
actively being planned.
Isn't that
or
about
not?
when she said? Did she say April or May? Do you remember?
That was a little while ago.
That's a year ago that we
No.
could have been hearing this.
I spoke to her about this more recently.
We're just waiting, get the grants in, so that she will update you, but it probably will be a few months.
So the building is being designed?
No, we're looking at, there will be an estuarium, but we're still waiting to see what the funding is. We have grant applications in, once we have a better idea, there will be something and she will update you.
In that
And there might be a
location,
Plan B estuarium.
Yeah.
that
Well, that's
might
what we were
not
told.
be
Larger or
$50 million.
smaller.
So we're gonna hear about that in April, is that the idea?
Well,
Or May?
now we're hearing a couple
like a
months.
few
May.
months.
I mean,
Yeah,
probably
30
more like
April.
May, I'd say like later, yeah.
It's the same footprint, hasn't changed.
Where,
Same
We don't-
location.
yeah.
Well, I think I'd like to just go on record to say that the community is extremely interested to be part of that planning process, as I'm sure you're well aware. So whenever, earlier than later on this would be really terrific.
We've been advocating for about 20 years about it. So
I know we're committed. to
give you a stack of
I think they are
I could give you
aware
a stack
for
of
what it's
resolutions.
worth,
So,
but
get us in there
they're
early
aware
in
for what
the
it's worth,
planning.
Because
So-
I also bugged them
So
about it.
is pedestrian traffic being rerouted on the bike lanes now? Because you said the staging area is where
No.
where is the staging area
The
for
staging
all the
area is right
things?
where the estuarium is.
So they'll just let people walk by and they'll just go, they'll stop
The deliveries,
foot traffic when they're taking things in and out?
we're limiting the deliveries to be, I think it's before 11 a.m. in the morning, right?
It's before 11:30 during the summer months and 10 it's 11:30 in the winter months, 10 in the summer months. That's for large. That's actually talking more about the large vehicular
Right.
traffic going onto the pier.
For instance, a concrete truck will have to be there, like basically first thing in the morning. We're limiting the amount of vehicles that will have to cross over into the yard. And they will be guided with flag people to make sure that there's no conflict conflicts with pedestrians.
So people usually walk along the water, so you're saying that that won't be a
I'm
problem?
getting there, well, I'm
Yeah.
moving this way.
Okay,
So they come in, big trucks come in, and then they unload to smaller little buggies and vehicles,
Mhm.
and they will be walked out via flagmen.
Okay.
Along here, there'll be a little French barricade from here to there, from here to there, and flag
so
people.
they'll just stop it from time to time?
They'll stop traffic for
Okay.
a little bit while it crosses. And then at the end of the night, the plan is right now to slide the French barricades up against the guardrail to create as much open space as possible. But that's, and most of that will all occur before noon. Try and get it out of the way early in the day.
And you've coordinated with the management of the restaurant?
Oh, yes.
So,
Oh, yes.
okay.
All right, why don't we have a quick report? The community board did receive a letter this week. Is it this week or last week? Whatever. Recently from Hudson River Park in regards to one item that was mentioned in our October resolution on this. Would you like to summarize what the letter
This
says?
is why Chris is here.
Okay, Chris, could you take care of that? And the letter is being circulated for you to see the letter that we just got.
Yeah, I mean, I think with regard to the water taxi, I used to work at EPA, so I was 10 years, I was in air programs, I went to law school at night, now I'm a lawyer, I work for the trust. But just so people understand the Clean Air Act. Clean Air Act, the state installs ambient air quality monitors to determine if an area is meeting a national ambient air quality standard. And then based on that, there's regulations that are established, whether it's a stationary source or a mobile source, and which includes maybe emission limits and testing. So typically, even your large power plants, your large factories do not have ambient air monitors. So the request in the resolution was for the trust to install ambient air quality monitoring stations in the park to monitor the water taxi. And our response, basically, we consulted with an environmental consultant, we consulted with DEC, I also have my own personal experience, we did our own due diligence, and it's really not feasible. An ambient air quality monitor only tells you how much particulate matter in parts per million, sulfur dioxide. It doesn't tell you the source of the pollution. And given we are a majestic thin park that's adjacent to a highway, lots of buildings with their own heaters and construction and garbage trucks and deliveries and ferries, etc., you couldn't tell, if there was an ambient monitoring, what was the source of the emissions. What we did instead, I think in our other letter to you, we explained all the commitments that you had a lot of recommendations in your earlier October letter. We have put all those recommendations in our concession agreement with Citigroup. So Citigroup, as explained in a letter, they are required to meet the most stringent standard, which is EPA Tier 3 standard for emissions. They're required to use ultra-low sulfur diesel fuel. They're required to minimize their idling time. And they're required, as time goes on, if the technology improves, to retrofit their engines. The thing we added to Citigroup, and we got a commitment last week, was two things, which is in addition to what we originally had in our concession agreement per the resolution on air quality monitoring. We asked them if they would provide testing every year to confirm they're meeting the Tier 3 standards, and they said yes. And we've asked them to give us documentation before they start operation that shows the new engine meets the Tier 3 standard. So they've agreed to those two commitments prior to operation, and then we'll have annual testing to ensure they're meeting the Tier 3 standard. So that's typically how air quality or Clean Air Act works. Stationary sources and mobile sources are subject to testing, and that's how we think we are carrying out your request in a feasible and practical manner.
Okay, thank you for that update. Wendy, go ahead.
So I would agree that it's probably hard to tell where the pollution comes from, but I would say as being a good citizen, I would want Hudson River Park to put those air monitoring in there to help the community understand the real threat of air pollution in our neighborhood. And I know it's a separate issue. We're not saying it's a cause-effect from the water taxi or the traffic on the street, but I would like for every park and every green space to be advocating for it to be greener. And we know New York City has a big problem with air pollution. And we know that the city is on the verge of, dramatic changes with, if we're really going to cut down on our CO2 emission. and I would ask you to be a partner in terms of helping our community know to say, hey, city, we really need to do this because air pollution, you know, right in front of Pier 26 is this today, and it's, you know, July it's this, and we, you know, it's that extra monitoring. I know it's not exactly your job, but I want to hear that the park wants to be a cutting-edge partner with the neighborhood and the city to make the place greener all the time. I have to say, my feeling with the Hudson River Park is it's the minimal viable, whatever it is that's what you're paying attention to. And I really feel like Battery Park, when we go to those meetings, and I go to a lot of them, they are talking about what's the next generation of technology, and you know, what's the organic gardening, what's this. They're always looking forward. I don't feel that from the Hudson River Park, and I'm asking you, like, I understand it's not for exactly for the ferry, but I'm asking you to partner with Battery Park to look at what the city needs to do, what our world needs to do, looking forward. So.
Well, I think too, with the estuary lab, we are doing that. You will hear some new announcements of how we're doing more sustainable green measures.
Well, there's no
in the
solar,
future.
there's no anything, I mean, every time we ask for that design, it's like, well, it's not really feasible right now. And so, you know, I just.
There will be some initiatives that are coming out that Madeline will be announcing soon, working with Estuary Lab. And so we are trying to continue our research and education to become more sustainable and partner with the community. And as far as the air quality, the reality is though, the city's air quality has improved significantly because there are a lot of new standards and emission requirements from multiple sources.
It's
So that, you know, when we grew up, it's a lot cleaner than when we grew up. And then when our kids grew up, it's a lot cleaner. So you know.
I know, I'm just asking for.
But we will be announcing some additional, or Madeline will be announcing some additional green measures, which I think you guys will be excited about.
All right, let's do two last speakers, and then I'm going to turn it over to Andrew, who has a few more updates on Hudson River Park. So, Alice and then Mark.
I just had a question in terms of this letter, which is very comprehensive on the air monitoring situation. I'm just curious if was there any discussion yet on the other request, for example, the use of the pier and the ferry for public use?
Yeah, I think my understanding is you guys are coordinating that with the water taxi city group. That's more of a question for them.
I think we're going to be pursuing that.
Good.
Yes.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with what Wendy said about the minimalist approach of the Hudson River Park Trust, and I think this letter kind of quantifies that when the trust starts quoting, we meet this standard and that regulation and this, and we're in compliance with this or that. Doesn't show a willingness to go above and beyond a little bit. You're just trying to CYI a little, I guess.
Well, actually,
But can I finish, please? Can I finish, please? Can I finish, please? And the major concern with the water taxi was its close proximity to the bulkhead, and those and the children in the park and all that stuff. So whether everything is in compliance, it's still an issue, and you just got to stand there and look at it and have common sense and say the emissions are blowing towards the kids and towards the bulkhead. That's all you need to see. So having the monitoring, you would know that. Well, if there's a spike during the day when the ferries are there, then you know it's from that or partly from that. If it's at night when they're not there, then you know partly that's not part of the reason. So, but like I said, the letter just reeks of bureaucracy to CYI, and that's my opinion.
Okay.
CYA.
Was it CYA? CYA, sorry. Correction.
Thank you.
trying to
Just
figure
stick
out what
around
the I
for
was.
maybe a couple minutes. You can hear Andrew's updates on a couple of other items that relate to the park. Okay, so Andrew has some updates also.
So both of these issues fall under the auspices of Hudson River Park Trust and things we've discussed before, at least as it relates to Pier 40. You may recall that there was a task force that was formed around the future of Pier 40. CB1 participated. I was representative of that. There was a summary, for lack of a better term, that was put forward to the trust, which really attempted to identify the issues that were particular to the community in terms of scope and size of what might be put on Pier 40, potential uses of a renovated Pier 40, and other aspects, again, that have been critical to the community and largely have been the underpinning of 2 failed RFPs in the past as it relates to Pier 40. That task force has been somewhat dormant for a number of months. Behind the scenes, the electeds have been working collaboratively to really lay out a path forward that would trigger potential change to the legislation, to the act, that would set some guidelines and parameters for what could be done on Pier 40 and perhaps create an environment or framework for an RFP that would be viable. There is a meeting next week on March 27th. I think it's at the Village Community School, to basically bring that task force and the electeds back together to provide an update as to where the conversations stand and next steps as it relates to what may happen over the next several months as it relates to the act and better definition of what could happen around Pier 40. So happy to send around details of that meeting.
Yeah, please.
Is this new zoning and legislation, when you talk about legislation, the trust is looking to rezone in some way, or?
To essentially expand the use of commercial office space.
Modify the state legislation that
Right.
governs the park.
Right.
And is
To
there something
allow
that,
for different uses, that's my understanding.
is there something we can read yet on that, or is that been probably?
I don't know, but they
What I would suggest is to read the, again, summary that came out of the task force, and I believe it's on the CB2 website. Again, it talks about changing the act to permit commercial office space as a permitted use. And again, largely that's designed to bring in revenue to Pier 40, which, as you know, is meant to help with build out and maintenance of.
And that's
our-
the trust's intention if they can get it? Is that your impression?
I mean, there are trust
I mean,
representatives
yeah, I
here.
mean, I think part of the process is they're talking about, would be an RFP, the committee would be involved in an RFP, and then the developer would pay to improve the fields and the outdoor space up here, all this, public spaces are going, but would also have the office use that would, help, bring in revenue to support the park and operations of it.
The focus at the moment, from my perspective anyway, seems to be a change to the act to allow office use on the pier. Again, that comes with a lot in terms of density and size and
Sure.
floor area usage and such, and those are things that are being discussed and need to be nailed down with
Right.
community input.
Quid pro quo comes. I understand.
Yes.
Yeah,
So when
this
will
was
that-
always a concern with, Bob, that opening up the act to modifications is opening up kind of a can of worms to, I know Deborah Glickso was worried about this. I don't know what her position is now on it, but I know, you can comment more, but I know she was always concerned about that. That would open up a can of worms to going with good intention, to allow a little commercial so they can get more revenue, and then all of a sudden we have a 40-story mall or something,
Is Deborah working on the issue?
Oh, yeah.
It
Okay.
certainly remains a concern.
She's working on this,
And I-
she'll need a bodyguard. I want to say something that I think the task force, if I remember correctly, was a Community Board 2 task force.
Right.
And I think there were members of Community Board 1 on the task force. One member or two?
One, I would say it was a task force led by Community Board 1, but with representation of a Community Board 2, with representation of a number of stakeholders. So
Yes.
Community Board 4,
Yep, sure.
various
also-
stakeholders
yep,
were
yep,
participants,
And one's representative of Community Board 1.
and one.
That's the
Community
Pier
Board
40
You
working
want there to
group,
be a
right?
second one?
No,
Yeah.
no.
Again, if you
Not-
go on
not
the
me.
CB2
I'll have my-
website,
I'll have my
you
hands
can
full.
read the details.
Can we get,
Wait, I just want to finish. I'll have my hands full chairing the Hudson River Park Advisory Council, but I do believe, again, this is my sort of mantra, I do believe this process will be a community board driven process, not a Hudson River Park Advisory Board. driven process, but that's Community Board 2 feels very strongly about
Right.
that.
That's-
They've always felt very
It
strongly.
seems that way.
And again, I would throw out there, Community Board 2 has been on point of shutting down 2 RFPs because of the view that it was bringing in a plan and a strategy that was inconsistent with the needs of the community. So there's a history of their blocking.
There seem to be two things going on, though. One is the development on Pier 40, and the other is the change of the Hudson River Park Act. Are these two different things coming?
They're tied, I think.
Well, they're tied, of course, but will the public be able to opine on both, on the act itself, regardless of its influence or not on Pier 40?
Only with input to the elected.
So when will that occur? Is there a time frame? I guess I
has
should
been-
ask this to
I think
you.
it's that March 22nd.
Well, I think
That's the
it,
public meeting to
Well,
talk
it's the
about?
but
community
that's-
board.
so I would say elements of that occurred in the past as part of the task force discussions. And I think, again, this meeting is an opportunity to discuss that, and I would suggest they're inextricably linked. Step 1 will be what will happen to the act to support potential development of Pier 40.
And any pier, though, or is it just for Pier 40?
Pier
The way
40.
the actively written, it'll just be for Pier 40?
In the past, I think it'll be just for Pier 40. I just want to say one other thing about the process, as far as I understand it. I don't think there's a zoning text change that's necessary to build on Pier 40, but I am not an expert.
No, I don't, I think it's mainly the act
Right.
that has to be modified.
Yes.
And in terms of some of the things he mentioned, and I think the number of years that a lease can be given,
Mary Ann might
things
know.
like that.
I'm not, I wouldn't bet on it, but I don't know.
Can
There may
Community
be a
Board
new
1
elected
have a
official.
meeting
There
on
may-
this? We have to go to this
It depends
meeting.
what the project
Well,
is also. It
it's
depends
a-
what the project is.
I would just say on that clearly Board, Pier 40 is within Board 2. And we tend not to, try to allow the other community boards, obviously, to have jurisdiction over their own things. Having said that, we have worked with them and said to them that, this is important to kids down here, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the point is that's part of the reason you're getting an update and a report, that we are still engaged in this. And I don't know that we've taken any firm positions on exactly how the legislation should be amended, anything like that. But we're basically just, I don't even know that the community board up there has done that. They've basically talked about the uses that they want to see used up there.
Yeah, I
Have they
think it's
commented on the act itself? And
They did a survey.
There are aspects, again, if you go to the CB2 website and look at the report,
Okay.
it does touch upon potential actions as it relates to the
Is
act.
it your sense that this legislation is going to be changed? Do you have a sense of that? 'Cause then I would ask-
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you're here, and obviously Deborah has always been a lead figure in Hudson River Park. Do you have any report that you could offer us?
No, I don't have a report on that, but it is my understanding that there are discussions going on about what their thoughts are to change the act, but I don't want to speak publicly on a position without that being.
Does the trust have a plan B if there is no change to allow for that revenue, to achieve the additional revenue? Do you have a plan B?
Financial conditions provided to the electeds and the community boards, as part of the process, we've been getting a lot of
Yes.
questions.
This has been an ongoing issue.
I know
as
that,
you
yeah.
know.
Yes,
It's,
I know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Pier 40 is in a common use area, which is why CB1 participation is required, not we're not invited, we're required to be there, so.
Okay.
Okay, one
All right.
last point. Do you have
I just
one
want to
quick
add,
point?
The takeaway from the meeting last week was that the reason why the electeds are taking charge of this time is because last time they got some things they didn't expect, like the Dillon Pier.
Like a what?
What was that?
Oh, the Diller Pier.
So this time, they are writing the legislation with your input, and they are very open to your input, right? And they were all at the meeting, and Congressman Nadler's representative led it last week, and he made it very clear, they're all there, they're all the elected officials involved, they want your input, they won't do anything without your input, and they don't want any surprises to come out of any change legislation.
So the community board's input is happening at a meeting on the,
No,
nobody,
well,
I
there
don't
will
understand
be
where the
more
community.
meetings, But trust me, the Congressman Stanley made it very emphatically clear, they want to control any changes to legislation, and they want community input to determine that changes.
Okay.
Well, great, then I think the community board should have input. That's a very important piece of legislation, as we all know, and Pier 40 or wherever these things will definitely impact community
And
board
they won't want
one.
more surprises to come.
Right, I think we
Well,
should.
then, maybe it needs to come from the executive committee.
I was just gonna say the same thing. I think we should discuss it there, just to get some sense
And,
of
and
not,
then right,
we don't want to start making war with Board 2.
right.
No, yeah.
So
no,
And
this
I'm not
should
saying that you're suggesting that, but on the other
be
hand.
knowledgeable about the
I
act.
think,
In the interest of time, can I move on to a second
yes,
topic?
we
Please.
have one other.
Which
Hudson River.
may fall into the same general theme or category of our involvement, but you may have heard that Gansevoort Peninsula is in process of a plan for design and development. A design firm has been contracted, funding is in place, $50 million to fund the project. Gansevoort Peninsula, if you're familiar, is sort of off the meatpacking district. It's a 5.6 acre site, so it's sizable. There was an initial meeting with the design firm to initiate the process. There are a series of meetings that have been scheduled, again, charrettes of sorts, similar to what was done with Pier 26, which I thought were very effective. The next meeting is next Tuesday, March 26th. And again, it's designed to bring the community together to start talking about the primary uses that the community would like to see in that space.
And where is that?
I don't know.
It's at 75 Morton,
Okay.
which is it's MS 297.
That's not the beach?
Oh,
So-
well, you're asking where the meeting is?
No,
or
the
what
No, where the-
Gansevoort Peninsula is where the beach has been spoken.
Yeah, no,
Right.
75 Morton is the meeting.
75 Morton is where the meeting is, so
At
it's
what
MS
time?
297. It's at 6:45 in the cafeteria, first floor.
And
Which is also our full board meeting.
Which and
Okay,
I'm not.
there's more to this report, let him
Well,
finish.
I'm not sure there is a lot more, but other than, again, there's a time frame, and I don't know, is that up on your website? Is that presentation that we saw?
Presentation is on the website.
Okay, so you can go and look at that presentation in terms of sort of the current layout. They have essentially cleared that space. It is ready for development once they get through the process of community input, planning, and whatever RFPs need to happen. And there's a detailed presentation that was given at the CB2 Parks, Waterfront and Parks meeting a week or so ago. I would encourage you to look at that presentation. It's got a lot of information. But this has legs to it, this will move. So-
I just want to, one more time to say, all of this will be beautiful, but I hope anything that's planned here takes into account what the future holds. And Pier 40, actually, I park my car out there, so I go there a lot and I read all the old signs. That whole facility was built and opened right at the verge of the time where air travel going to London. So it never made any money. Pier 40 was a failure from the moment it opened because it was being built for the last generation. And I would urge us to, whatever we're building, especially if it's $50 million, that some of that money is taken for planning for how Hudson River Park is going to address the next 50 years that we're going into. So I want to enjoy the here and now, don't get me wrong, but I just hope that there's some initiative for what's coming, because every meeting with Hudson River Park, there's no discussion, we're not ready, there's no thought about it, it's the state's problem, it's the governor's problem, it's somebody else's problem, it's the city's problem. Trust me, no one's paying attention to it unless you're paying attention to it. So,
Has CB2 having any resolutions yet on wanting the beach?
So I think, God.
Because we can do a
It's
companion
CB4,
resolution with
first
them,
of
so
all.
with the Brooklyn Bridge Beach.
CB2?
Yeah. Oh.
So there are
They chimed in yet?
there are CB2 resolutions about getting down the type of get down to the water.
Okay,
I believe there's been
good, all right.
expressed, and then there are also CB2 has worked with the Whitney to there's going to be an
There's an art
installation.
installation going.
An art installation at the Whitney. So
Okay.
I know that their
Good.
Parks Committee has come and presented. There are a number of options for the way the beach is going to be designed.
Mhm.
So I think
Good.
we had that presentation here a few months
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
As the different options, but I don't think there's a design yet
Okay,
for how that's going to happen.
but there's a support for it. No, is it
So I
all
can tell
concept?
you,
Well-
at the meeting last week,
Good.
water utilization, water uses and beach
gonna
were
be popular.
very common themes.
So-
How it gets baked in,
Oh,
Yeah, it's
different
gonna be
thoughts,
popular.
different views if it gets baked in, but that was certainly a very vocal.
Good. Good.
The view from the
Potential
Whitney
use.
was pretty good.
Pardon me?
The
View from the Whitney.
Yeah,
the
it's gonna
art,
be beautiful.
the project, the
Yeah.
project.
The view out the window, yeah, to the project itself.
Beautiful.
It's gonna be beautiful.
Okay.
And it's
Okay,
a permanent
I
installation.
Could
think,
make EDC maybe feel guilty.
I think we've made
Thank
it through
No
item
such
number
thing.
one.
You're probably right.
No,
Thank you
that's
guys
a
for-
possibility.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you.
all your updates. I'm sure we'll see you in a month or two. Thank you.
We'd like as many people to attend that,
Yeah,
correct?
it's decided.
Does
that
Battery
we
Park-
go every
We've been
time.
getting.
Does the Battery Park Authority have air monitoring?
Where's the one on the, where's the location?
Oh, yeah,
That's 75 Water Street.
That's the 26th.
Yeah, well,
That's
everybody
27th.
did.
The 27th, RHRPG.
Yeah, that's a good question, I don't know.
Oh,
Because
all
we're
right.
talking to
Because I
them
know-
to do it.
Yeah, I just feel like we should have it
I agree
everywhere.
with you. Also,
Yeah.
there would
Is
be a
So I
control
think I'm
because
gonna, I
if you
think he
get it
said
before
he
you put
knows
in
this
and
update.
float
Do
it
do
here,
you have
you
Yeah,
can
and I
get
have-
it
and I have
and
some
monitor
All right,
the
so I'll
level.
call on both
And
of
then you would have somewhere to go from ground level.
Yeah,
Sorry,
and
Alice, you were-
I'm happy to say this, and you're not to blame.
Is there an executive committee meeting tomorrow?
You know,
Air monitoring.
Okay,
I just want to say on the air mounting thing, I wouldn't say that is a discussion that all parks
Right,
I think what you said was all parks, because people go to parks
right.
to have,
Fresh air.
and there may be air monitoring.
there's a couple of ferries
devices.
next to Battery
You think
Park,
the
as I
EPA is gonna be
noticed.
Right.
stronger?
Does
And a couple on the east side.
Does
I
BPCA
know,
do
that's
air
the point.
monitoring?
They're
Because if so,
everywhere.
maybe we
Pier
could just
I'd
have
be
15.
that plan.
interested, I think the city does monitor air in certain spots. I would
According to
take
the
that as an
agenda.
agenda item
Maybe we can
that
ask
we are
that
interested
question.
in
That's quality of life too.
We can do that in
that.
environmental
Okay.
Say in
protection.
parks, it's a little different in
Environmental,
parks.
yeah.
All right, a possible later
Yeah,
item
Well,
to
that's what-
revisit.
I am,
Okay,
Or the
let's
subdivision.
try to move on. We have a few more items to go through. Governor's Island Ball Fields. As you recall, we were interested in gaining some use for our local teams, and I think we have some positive news there. Why don't you start off, Andrew?
We do, and I would just paraphrase a bit, not to secure use, but to maintain and expand use. We, as a league, have used it for the last 10 years, if not longer. They had put out an RFP, so take a step back. They, as part of the redesign of the park, they created two essentially baseball dimension fields, and then they created a polo ground, which was meant to be a multi-use, multi-purpose space. This year they put out an RFP seeking potential partners, as they referred to it, long-term partners to create programming and use those fields. Essentially, they wanted to get out of the annual permitting process, which was just time-consuming and labor-intensive. Long story short, Downtown Little League was able to secure a 5-year permit for those fields, which is great, just secures our future.
That's
Thank
for
you.
weekend use?
We only needed it for weekend use. I think there are other programs that are using it for weeknight use. I will tell you that we've asked them to spend a bit more time on maintenance of those fields. So for example, in the polo grounds, they had a concert one night and it rained the day before and the day after and basically shut the fields down because of the traffic associated with the concert, shut the fields down for the rest of the season, which impacted a lot of activity. So we're having conversations with them around that. But thanks to, I think this group helped us put a resolution in place, which was timely and helpful, so nice to claim a bit of victory on that.
Great. Diana, do you have any
Yes.
further updates?
Yes, very brief. They also said regarding the RFP that the goal of the RFP was to encourage season-long consistent use of the fields, and they will continue to accept permits on a per diem basis via govisland.org pending field maintenance and availability for this season. Sarah from the Trust for Governor's Island will be coming to this committee next month to give a bigger presentation on kind of the overall programming for this upcoming season. And we spoke a little bit about the concern over the East River Park closure. And she did say if the topic of next year comes up now, and the East River Park closure, I would like to request that the group holds off on discussions until I come to the committee in April with a season update. Please let the committee members know that I would love to have a discussion at the next meeting and hear ideas on how we can do outreach. So they want to help in light of that closure, and they want our help on ideas on how they can do that and kind of fill that gap. And I will just say that regarding the plan for the South Island redevelopment, which that ULURP and that rezoning was supposed to certify at the end of this month on the same timeline as the Manhattan Detention Complex, but the former Deputy Mayor Alicia Glenn was in charge of this South Island redevelopment for Governor's Island, and since that position hasn't been replaced, Governor's Island is kind of in a holding pattern until that space is filled and whoever that person is brought up to speed. So that is kind of TBD. They don't have an idea of when that will be. They're kind of at the whim of the mayor's office.
And I just want to add, one of the reasons why Governor's Island is going to become even more critical to our community is we're entering a period of long-term crisis of outdoor recreational space. So in connection with the East Side Resiliency, they're taking down East River Park for potentially up to 3 years. I mean, that's a lot of lost field space for a long period of time. Depending on what happens with Pier 40, very likely those fields will go down at least for some period of time, and maybe at different times, depending on what's approved there. That's a critical hit in terms of field space. BPCA has a resiliency plan that, again, there's a meeting Thursday to talk about that. We're hopeful they don't have to shut down the fields for that, but if they do, again, it impacts 3,000 kids that use that field between soccer and baseball. So securing Governor's Island long-term is an important plan B. And when those New York City parks go down, I guarantee what's going to happen. The leagues that are impacted are going to get time that has been legacy other leagues. So Bob's Manhattan Youth is going to be impacted. They're going to find time for Manhattan Youth, and the way they're going to do it is they're going to carve out chunks.
Not in Governor's Island.
No, not Governor's Island, but other parks as well.
Maybe we're going to substitute chess for soccer.
So there's going to be a lot of noise over the next couple of years. On
Video
this.
games. All right.
It's going to be a mess.
It really is.
We know.
We met with the folks.
Just one quick question. So you said there's 2 baseball leagues. Is that fields? Does that mean the soccer leagues don't use Governor's Island to much of an extent? They're not.
Soccer uses the polo grounds, which is that multi-purpose open field
Did they get any
space.
kind of permit? Do we know?
I do not know.
You don't know either.
They did say, although they haven't yet publicly announced, I don't see any press in the room, they haven't publicly announced winners of the athletic fields RFP, but it is safe to say that we accepted all who applied, including Downtown Little League.
I'm talking about soccer league.
I don't know about
there's
that.
the Village Soccer League, right?
Downtown Soccer League.
Downtown, right.
Just,
I mean, they were certainly
I
part
don't
of
know
the
if
initial
football
conversations
teams like
on the
to use that
RFP.
field.
okay, we could pursue that. Maybe you could
Sure.
just
I
find
can
out.
find out. I'll
And-
call
or-
Bill. Yep.
Thank you, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so that's the update on Governor's Island. Let's move on to item 3.
So, sorry, just everyone got that the next BPCA resiliency meeting is this Thursday, and I know it's resiliency, but it also potentially impacts the ball field, so that's just what I
It's
mentioned.
gonna be a big
Yep.
wall.
Thursday at River Terrace, 6 River Terrace, I believe.
Yep, 6 to
I have
8.
a question about that. Has there been any discussion whether or not that plan has to shut down the Battery Park City ball fields?
Been a lot of discussion. They've told us they're acutely aware that that would be painful, and they're gonna make every effort not to, but there's a lot of infrastructure under those fields in terms of the electrical lines and
That's why I
Drainage
advocated
and-
with Mr. Goldstein not to put those two buildings at the other end of the fields.
so it was a front and center
For a
topic
number
of
of
conversation at the
We
first.
did pretty well there.
We did okay, Paul. We got those two fields, which they
Yes.
wanted to put buildings on.
Which are the
But-
best in the city, quite honestly.
Yeah, but there is some discussion that those fields could go down.
Correct.
There's discussion that the fields, every effort should be made not to take the fields offline.
That,
Correct.
you know, that's why I like it. He's such a positive thinker. Good, okay. And
More to
there's
come
no
after
alternatives
Thursday's
to that.
meetings.
None.
Right.
There's no real alternatives.
Because asphalt is not green.
Because there's the only other fields,
There's no alternative. Bob.
there's no alternative.
There's too much
Right.
activity. You can't find space for that amount of activity. And again, they really are very aware of that. But it may be inevitable depending on what they've got to get to under the
So
fields.
that's what, I roll the dice.
Okay.
And we'll have to go
Sorry.
to Brooklyn.
Okay, I think we could now move on to item 3. So this is a continuation. As you know, we passed a resolution last month on the Esplanade making recommendations, and I think they may be coming back as soon as next month.
They haven't confirmed, but that's the idea.
So
Yeah.
we're going to hear from them. That's on a crazy timeline to try to get it done really quick before they lose the money. Anyway, one item that did come up that we didn't really have a chance to discuss that I just wanted to mention here and see if we want to say something is underneath the FDR Drive on the east side, there is considerable parking. And that is obviously a generator of income for the city. And I think that's what it mainly is. I don't think
Is that
it's.
paid parking?
I think it's paid. I don't think that's where the NYPD parks, although I could be wrong. I've lost track of
How
some
far
of
up
that
are
stuff.
how far up are you talking for?
I'm
Like
talking
Capitol
To the
about
Manhattan
from
Bridge?
like Peck to the Brooklyn Bridge, sort of in that space as far as I know. So,
It's public parking, I mean, or it's
yes,
privately
as
owned?
far as I know, it's
It
public
looked like
parking.
that,
So,
but
you know,
you
there
said
is
so.
the issue that they also have at Pier 40 where some community people may use those spaces, and I don't know if they're going to be pleased if we recommend that. I'm not suggesting that we keep the parking there just for that reason, but I just throw that out. Having said that, we did not say anything about that parking, and maybe
wanted to
we
advertise.
can go on record saying that we would prefer to utilize, to recapture that space for community use, for park space, and I guess we could,
Open space.
maybe we could throw in there that we're open to discussing other ways to generate income, just like we said to Howard Hughes, if they move their thing away from the view corridor, maybe we look at it. Although I'm not saying we have to say that either. The point is, do we want to go on record saying that we want them to make every effort to eliminate the parking so that this community, which is so short on public open space, can utilize that space? Okay, a few comments. This is probably an easy one to accomplish, but let's just go through it.
I don't think we should comment yet. I think we need more information to see, like what you said, one issue about resident parking. How much of that parking is used by tourists that come there that spend money in Seaport? Because other than, can I finish, please? Other than parking there, finding parking on the street is very difficult. So I don't know who we can call or what agency might know or who regulates the parking or how much of that
TDC,
parking is
isn't it?
used. So can we, I think before we comment on let's get rid of all the parking, let's find out how much of that use really is necessary
the
and
only-
not necessary.
The only
Yeah.
comment I'll make is that, based on the time frame for this project, the fact that they're gonna actually come back with tentative, designs by next month, I don't think we have time on this one. Normally, it would be a very good idea to gather as much information, but I think this is just a
Well, with the
crazy
lack of
situation.
information, I don't know if we should
All right,
go
wait.
absolutely on record of.
Okay,
Couldn't we
let's
roll in-
discuss it in
Yeah,
committee.
yeah.
Okay, we'll go.
Okay, well, given that I brought this up at the full board meeting and asked to have that added to the resolution, and as I recall, you had said that you didn't want to do
I
it.
felt we should discuss
I'm
it.
very delighted that you brought it up as a topic, and I feel strongly that it's something that we should add. There's no question that most of this parking, at least what I've been told, is EDC related. EDC will do what they need to do to keep whatever parking they want, but I think the community, unless we want to have parking that we can't use, I would imagine that we would want to have some sort of record of trying to keep that space as open for open recreation as possible, given our history for needing open recreation, particularly in light of recent conversation. So that is why I originally brought it up. I also will say that speaking to the designers, i.e. Laura Starr of Starr Whitehouse, who happens to be on our board and who is working on this, she feels very strongly that that would be something that would be helpful to go on record saying that we want to have less
I
parking.
didn't know if she wanted her name mentioned. She certainly made that clear to me as
Oh,
well.
I didn't know that, but I mean, well, I don't think
Part of the
that's,
Star
I don't know,
report.
is that's a, I mean,
Her company's working on it,
yeah,
but
not
Laura
Laura. That-
personally is not
Right, that
working
is
on it,
a
yeah.
really important point. Laura is not working on that plan, but she had met, because I asked her and she mentioned, that's a great idea. So I just put that,
Right.
What do you mean
out
you were
there.
told it's EDC parking? They park there?
yeah, that it's EDC regulated parking.
Regulating, but.
So there's not tourist, it's not
Well,
Paul,
it-
whoever
it
owns the
could
car.
be
I don't know
But I don't
anything
know, I
about
do
It
not
could be
know that.
EDC renting
Well,
it out
I'd
to
like
a
to
park.
know.
Where I live.
I'd like to know.
Yeah,
But
no, I
I think we should
understand.
say
I don't know the
strongly
answer.
Okay, let's
minimize.
gather back together.
Anyway, I
and-
just wanted to.
I think we should say minimize, and,
Yes.
Yeah,
because
that's what I had
eliminate
said, yeah.
is,
Right.
hard for us to justify, but I think minimize.
That was
Well, I think
my
create
original-
public space, open space.
Well, to minimize
is a more
parking, allowing.
positive.
Right.
And maybe the parking that they do allow has
Okay.
to be double decker or whatever
So-
those elevators are, so that, that's another way to, I mean, they're ugly, but they're,
Okay, so there's a
it would-
motion on the
maybe-
table for a resolution urging EDC and the designers to
Minimize
try to
the footprint?
recapture
Right.
a good amount
To
of that space and
maximize
to minimize.
Maximize public, open public
You,
space.
you have that
Maximize
language?
public space.
And minimize.
Okay, are we ready
Yeah,
to vote on that one?
minimize the
Yes.
parking footprint.
Okay,
Just so
all,
I'm
oh.
in favor of it, I'm always in favor of, you're talking about under the FDR.
Under the
Correct.
FDR.
Not not the parking near the arches of the Brooklyn Bridge.
No, under the FDR.
No, and that's
that-
DOT.
that's another space that we should be recapturing.
Yeah,
but-
right, you're right, you're right. Okay,
Right,
so
not for
I
this
call the
resolution.
question.
Okay, all in favor?
Opposed? Abstaining? Recused?
Thank you all.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, and then the last item,
Battery Park City East.
oh.
No, this is just the one site.
Yeah,
Well,
I know, but that
I
becomes.
suspect there will be plenty of discussion on that one.
You think?
Yes. And I think that's going to begin whether we like it or not. So I will leave that for another meeting, and I think frankly, we as a board have to figure out who's going to have jurisdiction over, a project like that. I mean, we may have differences of opinion on that. That's what we'll perhaps kick around at the executive committee. But in any event, I think the board, clearly, that's going to be a major issue for the
Right.
board moving forward.
But it pertains to item 4, Paul. The new market site may become part.
Again, I think we should, my opinion on these projects, and you may have differences, is that we should proceed with what we can get done now, especially, we're talking about, if we're talking about that project that the mayor announced the other day, I'm sure most of you know what we're talking about, a landfill a la Battery Park City on the east
Yeah,
side.
Which is
just
probably
the
years.
studies.
Years and
And-
battles,
And
battles
anyone
and years
who's
and
lived
litigation.
here or
Right.
done any exploration knows
Yeah.
that Battery Park City took many, 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 many years to get done, and it's still in the process of being finished, even as we speak. And, my point being that I don't know that because that's on the table now, we should stop advocating for other
Okay,
potential
but we have
projects.
to rebuild the pier in order to put something on the New Market site. So therein lies the rub in terms of the city has told us clearly over and over again, EGC has said they don't have the money to rebuild the New Market pier platform.
Some of those things can change. You never know what will happen. Maybe in Washington, there'll be a new administration that will be much more sympathetic towards
Well, we certainly have it on the state
projects
level.
like this. And,
I think it's a similar situation at Pier 40, where, or more for the beach, in terms of there's gonna be near-term things that we're gonna use. I mean, if they're redoing all that walkway under the bridge, that's short-term, that we should advocate for a plan in the interim as we go, if they're gonna build a seaport city or whatever it's gonna cost, or, call it in the future, there's gonna be a very long time, and our neighborhood shouldn't suffer for 30 years or 40 years or however long. I mean, I don't know, how long do you think it will take? 20 years? I mean, this is the thing that I don't know. I'd like to know more about, like, if we are living here, we should have a short-term plan, a medium-term plan, and someday for our great-grandchildren, this is what we'd like, But, I don't know, does that make sense at all, to have a little bit of a short-term thinking?
I know what you're gonna
Yeah.
suggest, and I
Yeah.
think it's a good one, so why don't
Okay,
you do it?
okay. So
Little
I,
telepathy going on.
so I,
here.
well, he's very cordial and gracious with all the ideas, but, yeah, it's an idea to be a little more proactive as a community board and to consider doing our own plan. In other words, to begin potentially to ask, I think this community board has a little bit of funding. What if we were to hire someone, a professional planner, to work with us? In microcosmically, we have the Department of City Planning. Hopefully someday we might get a whole overall plan of Lower Manhattan. That would be great, Allison. But
Oh, that's what you're suggesting?
there you go. Well, in your free time. But in the meantime, the
And not on
the
the
idea
water.
is to do a plan, and these are done frequently, of just certain areas. And in this case, I think one done of the historic seaport, showing what can and can't be built, ideas that we could implement, working with a planner. There are people that do this. I do know someone, we all know people, actually Diana knows the same person I know who does this and who works with community boards on just this sort of thing. I'm happy to pass around some examples through email of what this looks like, but basically it would provide for the community something visual that tells us exactly what can and can't go on, not just at Newmarket. It would include 250. It would show us what's going on under the FDR. It would show us the whole of, let's say, just the historic seaport. Let's just take that for an idea. And working with the whole plan as a group, understanding what are the variables that can and can't be built in terms of zoning, in terms of the history, in terms of all of the different variables, and looking at alternative ways to consider the development of these sites. Physical massing models that actually can and can't be built. Not just simply stating, I'd like a park, I'd like a pool, I'd like a this or that. What can we and what can't we do? There are alternatives to a 100-foot tower. There may be many ways to look at the massing and zoning of these sites that none of us have thought about. But if we work together with a planner, and I don't know that it would be that costly, it might be an approach where we're a little more proactive rather than waiting for Howard Hughes to present their final analysis on the situation in all of its piecemeal, the 250 or the Market Street. So it's an idea. I'm happy to flesh it out more by showing you some examples of what I'm talking about. And get pricing,
So
which
you're
I've asked for.
talking about us hiring
Yeah.
this planner?
Yeah.
The community board. Do we have any kind of an idea about what
Pricing,
that costs
I'm
and.
getting that. I would actually asked for a proposal just for the heck of it, because he's somebody I know.
I know we have a few extra dollars,
Yeah,
but
that'd be great.
I thought that was going elsewhere.
Well, I have no idea. It's just an idea. I just feel like we're always talking about needing a plan, needing a plan, needing a plan. What if we work together in
No,
producing
I understand. I mean,
Yeah.
one would hope city planning would do this, but.
Well, I
All
think
right.
this is a little different.
I'd like to hear more about like the scope of the plan you're imagining, because, sorry, at the beginning I was thinking you were suggesting like a community board resiliency plan in reaction to
No.
what the mayor was suggesting. in
No,
the
I'm talking about
article. So Lower Manhattan.
well, that would be fantastic to someday have a master plan in New York. I mean, I'm one of these people who believes that it's not just zoning, that we have a real
Yeah.
urban plan.
So, but I guess I'm just confused with the scope, what kind of scope?
Well, I think the scope of that would take a long time, and it would be great to work with city planning on that. So yes, I think it's two parts. That would be a much bigger, project where you're looking, I mean, I don't know if Department of City Planning has anything like that. I mean, there is no master plan currently of New York, so, or of Lower Manhattan, so I would advocate one for that. But that's gonna take a while, I suspect, and would probably take a lot of different people agreeing, and I don't know what. This is a little more, the community board hires an individual to look at a particular area, looking at massing diagrams, for example, of alternative scenarios on those sites that are in the seaport that we're always talking about. You know what I mean? Like what was done for NYCHA at the Holmes Tower site on
Sure.
Uptown.
We need to know.
Where they worked with Community Board Aid.
But I would point out that there
It's just an
are
idea.
some differences between, say, the New Market site and 250 Water.
But you look at all of
250
them.
Water, for example, has very specific 262A zoning with setback requirements and height limits and all that type of stuff. So a lot of that is already in place.
But nobody sees it together, Paul, that's my idea, is where do we ever see the whole plan as a physical reality, three-dimensional,
Well,
showing
the truth is, if
massing?
you went back and looked at some of the designs that were presented years ago, there were a few that were of lower scale.
But
and-
no one shows yet what Howard Hughes owns, what they can and can't build, where the receiving sites are, where the granting sites are. I don't know, to me, a document that shows the entirety of someday Lower Manhattan, but specifically districts, or the Civic Center. We're always talking about where this jail is gonna go and what's it gonna look like, but we never see it.
Why don't you
It's
find
like
out?
this idea of trying to do neighborhoods, maybe to consider what a proactive plan would look like. What would it look
I
like?
think we are starting to think about, I'll call on you in 1 second,
Okay,
Bob.
sure.
How we're gonna handle all these big projects, especially on the east side, that are sort of coming all together and mushrooming, and how we as a board are going to manage them, and shouldn't we sort of, instead of taking one at a time, which has always been a terrible strategy, especially from the community board standpoint, and we've asked Howard Hughes a million times for a master plan.
They're not gonna give
And they've never accommodated, and I don't expect them to, at this
Not in
point.
their interest.
So that's what I'm just saying,
So,
in this
I have
particular
a
example.
Go ahead.
I have two things to say. One, I believe any process should involve young people, young university students, graduate students, who are gonna inherit this city and their vision, because their vision is different than older people's vision. The second thing is, I wanna get to a point where I think I could even agree to putting any one speck of dirt covering up a river again. I don't think, my kids grew up in Battery Park City. I wanna get to the point where I'm saying you're gonna fill in the river, and I'm not there yet. The river is the number one, and I will not make friends with this in city government. The river, as I understand it, is the number one piece against global warming. You can't stop the flow of rivers, and maybe you could build up the banks of the existing banks, but you can't, I am not
We're
gonna
gonna
go
have to have a
for
long
another-
conversation.
Yeah, but
Obviously, they're making the argument
No,
that
that's
this is
the-
the best
that's the
plan
whole-
for the
that's
east
the
side
plan.
resilience.
No,
not the
but-
whole.
No,
private.
build it out forever.
I mean, that's not really what we're talking about.
That's not what,
No,
yeah.
city.
We're not gonna be dealing with that
The
plan,
city,
I don't
but
think.
that plan That plan,
Do
what
you
is it
have a
called,
way-
city, what is it
what's
called?
on the
Seaport City.
Do you have a way of
Seaport City.
ascertaining
Now
the
that
Fills
is
in
an
the
idea.
river.
About 20,000.
Yeah, it's called,
Well,
we
de
don't have
Blasio
Extends
helping his real estate
the
cronies.
A couple of blocks.
I'm gonna find that.
All right,
all right,
let's gather it together. Come
Let's
on.
see if we can,
We're gonna try to wrap up in 10, 15
fine, because I think
so
what
let's-
you're saying is very
Hold on.
worthwhile.
So I won't-
Al,
Gives us a
Paul,
scope.
Let's call on people and everyone, shh. Let's get some order. Okay.
I think what I'm hearing is rather than wait and fight about each lot as it's attacked,
Right.
or
Look at the whole lot.
not necessarily attacked, but as each lot comes under discussion, since nobody is going to give us a master plan, because I believe this board has asked for it for many, many times, many, many years.
Yes,
Yep.
that's
And
correct.
since we know that the principal developer in that area isn't gonna give us one, and EDC doesn't wanna give us one because they're working with the developer, maybe we'd better come up with one, and not just a charrette, as has been done in the past.
No, I mean,
Right, people have studied the historic district and said this is what it should be, but I think we need one a little closer to home that says these are the rules.
these are the rules. It's
Right,
really
yeah.
just not an
Exactly.
idea
This is
plan.
what
This isn't
can be
an
done.
academic exercise to think about what would we like on that
Right.
site, but rather, what can you have on these
Right.
sites? What is allowed by law
And
today?
this
What
is-
side is
And
your whole-
look, I'm getting, what do you think about that idea? I mean, here's somebody from could we get that from the Department of State Planning? That would be the bargain way to do it.
I would
Yes.
just say,
The land.
I'm very hesitant to speak on behalf of the city of
No.
New York at this time, but just from my personal perspective, I feel like, I'm still kind of unclear of the scope that you're talking about, but for example, in the site, the 250 Water Street site, that is a privately owned site.
Yeah, it's out
Versus
there.
the Newmarket building is EDC owned, it's a
Right,
publicly owned site.
Right.
So how the city can engage and discuss and make a plan for sites that they do or do not own, right? I mean, the 250 Water Street site already has to follow, there is zoning, which is like kind of the underlying rules.
Right.
And that kind of does speak to what the city envisions as what could exist on a site. And you could, of course, make a simple massing that follows the current zoning, but if there's other things beyond that as a layer, as in regards to like the programming, how it speaks to the historic district, what resiliency measures, like if there's other things beyond just what the blanket zoning requires in terms of massing, then, I mean, that could be something to explore. But I think I'd have to go back and talk to my colleagues about, like, historically how we've been involved in community master planning efforts that we're discussing projects that, are not publicly owned and are not an active project, It's not as if the property owners come to us saying, we want to do X, let's work together. They just own the property and they're
Right,
sitting
but
there.
do you have it, you do have, I mean, because I know that Bill McDonald at Pratt showed us one time that there is a 3D computer model out there that people can, that architects and, land people, I mean, do you have, you can go over any site and see.
Great idea, like,
But
you could have an
connecting that.
architecture student make a very simple massing of what. would
Yeah,
exist on that
although
site.
I actually introduced you, Bill, and Pratt, and even Pratt is terrific for all that. This one I would think we would probably wanna, when I said a professional planner, and of course, I'm not talking about looking at, I'm not looking at talking about idea plans, I'm talking about a professional who can sit down like yourself and state what is and what can be, not what we might like. That's a second
Right, that's what-
iteration of this, but I just think, that maybe the schools could do it, maybe Pratt could handle that, and I would ask, people that we know there, but I just think, before we figure out who could do it, is it something that we want to consider, just to be a little more proactive on what, we've been feeling for years now about talking about what's the plan, is just to produce the plan.
Is the idea that eventually, if development can happen on this site or any other site in the Seaport, you wouldn't have to be so reactionary?
Exactly.
Exactly
We
right.
are
Be like,
proactive,
this
we
is
are
what we've already
armed with a
decided on.
plan, and as a planner, you can appreciate that. I mean, I feel the same way, it's like we're always choked. People are visual, they need to see it. I don't know if anyone was here for when we were talking about Rikers Island, and one of the people from the Lower East Side came in and showed this extraordinary image of these two yellow towers that will go into that site. And all of a sudden, everybody's gasping because they finally understood what other people might have understood but never
I think
seen
we
before.
are starting to do some of those things.
And I think that's really important.
At the Land Use Committee, we did pass a resolution that was
Absolutely.
proactive on 250 and on the brownfield, and we said exactly what we think should go there. We didn't just say, we don't like this or we don't like this. We said, this is the way we want it done. We said we want a plan for the site.
Exactly.
And we said, number two, that we're already strongly support the zoning that this board sponsored.
So if we add the layer of the visual of what this could look like and what alternatives could be on the site within the current zoning, for example, that would be a layer that I think would be very useful as a
How about Rick
tool.
Cook? We could hire him. You know,
So I think
Thank you.
the visuals are
And I
important,
think the
most
idea
people are
of what
visual,
could
I
go there,
like
and
that
then
idea.
also
I guess my
what will
question is,
happen as it
would
floods.
someone, do we know if someone like a Seaport
I mean, it'd be
Alliance or
nice to have
anyone
a
might
little
have
of
done
that.
something similar that we can draw from, or?
Not on that scale.
Not on that
I would-
scale,
Okay.
no.
No, and the
I mean,
old Seaport
I
Alliance
would like to have it
is
in
Yeah,
combination
that's
of what
less
could
like-
happen and then how much
on
it
the
would flood.
Neil.
That's a different
But
set
it
of
should be, but
Yeah.
it should
tools.
be, it could be linked though, right?
Are there-
all right, here's what I think.
But no, Allison,
Oh, I was just curious.
Go ahead.
This conversation seems to focus on the 250 Water Street site, but are there other sites that are?
Yeah, the new market
Yeah,
site.
there's the new
Well,
market,
I was
there's
saying-
John Street.
I was saying you could,
Not a lot of
you could
sites.
see hiring yourself to do, I could see doing, like you take South Street Seaport, the historic district as one quadrant. You could take the Civic Center. You have, planners can't do, I don't know anyone who you can hire at an affordable rate to do the whole of Lower Manhattan, but you could see hiring somebody to just do, not just 250 Water Street, but inclusive of the new market, and that whole, the historic Seaport. Let's look at it again, 2019, what we've got, what we can have. I don't know, look, it's for somebody to respond with a proposal. It might be something that the board isn't the least bit interested in, but I think it's worth asking for a proposal to see what could be provided and getting it doesn't cost us anything to do that.
We also have the John Street lot,
Yeah.
which is
Absolutely.
another.
And so, and we can't see any of this
lots.
in its totality without some kind of visual
That
thing,
the-
and we're
the
reacting little by
museum
little, in a near half blind, really.
Well,
We
the
can't
other
really see.
issue is that these matters are taken up by other committees other than this one.
Right, so that everyone can use these
So,
plans.
another idea that I sort of floated a little bit is that we may need a special task force for this area because of all the complicated issues that have to do with not just land use, but waterfront and resiliency, and all these issues are sort of being melded together. So, anyway, that may be an issue that we have to take up at the executive committee.
But either way, having a plan that everybody can use, on your computer and on boards or however they get, and presented. And I will send around examples of this because I think it'll be easier to understand. But
All right.
it's something I would,
Thank you
just
for-
asking for people to think about it. That was it.
Fair
Thank you
enough.
for
Good
the
idea.
It's a very,
Go ahead.
idea.
I would just suggest that having that kind of visual would give people a visceral appreciation of what's being discussed. Because the zoning resolutions, as we all know, is sort of the opening bid in the negotiation. It's not meant to be, not in the historic district.
And no one understands what 12 stories are versus 100 stories. Most people can't really understand scale. These things would then become alive and
I
people
don't
could
think
pay.
most people even know what the historic district consists of.
Okay,
That
there you
it's,
go.
that
Even
it's
more
a
so.
10-block area. I
even,
think most of the new people in particular, they don't realize
Right.
this parking lot is part of a historic district.
So
They
it's-
just
Right.
think
Doesn't look very
this is a
historic.
parking lot. Well, of course we should build something
And yet the
here.
new market site is not part of the historic district of the city,
Well, that's-
which we
that's
fought,
another
which
issue.
we
Okay.
fought for years,
Okay.
with multiple
Do we have any
resolutions
press in the
Okay.
room
to
at
get
the
the city
moment?
to
Yes.
include.
I have my own website.
There's not.
No? So Paul, you asked, if 2 minutes, you asked a question which I was curious if it was gonna be answered earlier, which was, what do we think's gonna happen in Pier 40? And I'm just speaking my opinion, not for attribution, it's just the vibe that I think is happening. I think the electeds are in broad consensus to change the act.
Yeah.
I think it may go to the June session. I think it's June. I think there's support to change the act to support commercial office space.
Yeah.
They are deathly afraid, and I think will put significant belts and braces around what that commercial office space can be in terms of scope and scale. And I think their vision is a refurbishment of that square in its current form, as opposed to other plans that Hudson River Park has put forward to take that floor space and put it into a concentrated multi-story building on one wing of the pier. That's the strong vibe that seems to be.
Not go higher?
So you
If
say
it
go
goes-
low.
If it goes higher, not much higher at all.
Oh, that's a great
So-
plan.
Well, that's better.
Well, again,
Did you hear-
I'm expressing my view.
Where would the office space then
Office
go?
space, I've been saying that for years.
Within the existing space of the.
What about,
At one flush.
I will tell you, I
Figure it
think
out.
the trust will attempt
To
to
know it all.
push back, saying that that current configuration is not a desirable
Donut.
configuration, because you could have
What?
colleagues.
But the trust has said they don't have the money, and
They
they
always
need
say
to
that.
generate
And
it.
I think what,
Yeah.
I think what is happening
I think
is
you're
that,
right.
taking Alice's strategy, I think there's a force that has proactively spoken to the development community to see what type of office space configuration
Amazon.
can work within that.
still any rumblings of residential or hotel?
Yeah.
No,
And
not at
Andrew-
all.
Okay,
Hotel-
good.
Hotels,
Google-
dead,
Google
should
take
residential.
right
Sleep in your office?
Google
Good.
would love that.
Honestly, the only, and again, my
They would love to
view,
look out on the fields.
my view, I'm not speaking on behalf of the community board or the task force. The only thing I think that's going to be an area of focus in terms of the act is commercial office space and the term, the lease term.
You just gotta hope when they bring it to the floor of, when they bring it to the
Well,
legislative.
that- Yes, I mean, again, belts and braces in terms of usable floor
Wow.
space and
But
height.
there'll be
So
other,
limited- sorry.
there'll be other,
It should have been 10 years ago.
advocates or lobbyists when it goes to the Senate floor, that, other senators from upstate could, like I said, opens a can of worms. I have an amendment, we should be able to build 3 stories, whatever is an example.
Mark all.
And then it could wind up, just to say, it could wind up getting completely out of control, maybe.
Again, I think,
Yeah,
I think
but
the
I know-
elections
I know.
are pretty focused on.
We were there with the
And-
first 2
and I think
RFPs,
they
so
paved
I
the
think
way
Deborah
to-
will help with that.
I hope,
That's
yeah.
gonna- That's gonna be fun to see, so thank you for.
She'll
sharing
be the
that.
stopgap.
Thanks for
I hope
that.
so.
Thanks for
All
that.
right, thank you all. To be continued.
I'd love to hear more about what the, the water is rising.